war machine at machine speed, they needed a code machine, a truth machine, a machine to obscure, a machine to puzzle. In Berlin, the German engineer Arthur Scherbius demonstrated an encoding machine available on the commercial market. He'd named it after a haunting composition by the British composer Sir Edward Elgar, the Enigma Variations.
The Enigma Cipher machine had a row of typewriter keys which you pressed to put the message into code. It ran through a current and emerged as lit up letters on a screen. So you pressed an A, out would come a Q, you'd press an A again, out would come an X, and so forth. The heart of the machine was a wired code wheel. It continues turning 26 times. Each time you're pressing A different letter will come out. Next to this wired code wheel, you have another one, so that when this one, like the odometer on your car, turns over one turn for one revolution, then the next one turns over one space. You can then have 26 times 26 times 26 is 17,000 and change number of combinations before those sequence of letters repeats. The problem for the decoder is not just finding the original wiring here, but determining which rotors are in which position and what starting position. And there were a number of other combinations. So this is an enormously complicated and very wide-ranging problem.
You can keep changing these cylinders and keep changing the codes constantly, so that even if the enemy managed to start to crack a message, by the time the enemy has cracked the message, the purpose of the message is all gone.
The power of the Enigma was in the vast number of cryptovariables, or different combinations of encoding possibilities, that it could generate with only 5 variable components: a plug board, 3 ordered rotors, each with 26 starting positions, a movable ring on each rotor, and a reflector half rotor. The number of these possible configurations was a figure so large that it had no name, except 3 times 10 to the 114th power. By comparison, it is estimated that there are only 10 to the 79th power atoms in the entire observable universe. This gave the Germans confidence in their machine. As the Nazis gained power, this common enemy drew British and French intelligence together. But the Poles, surrounded and outnumbered, had a special need to know German intentions. Polish intelligence went on high alert. It monitored all forms of German communications, including the mails.
About 1930, there was a parcel sent from Germany to Warsaw to the German consul there. That was Saturday. Parcels were not delivered, so the Polish intelligence was informed about this.
It was a code machine, an Enigma, and they only had it for 48 hours.
They make all possible copies, photographs, etc., packed this, that the Germans will not know that the package was opened. And it was delivered to German consul on Monday morning.
The Poles had the insight that machine codes could be broken by mathematicians. They asked a promising young student, Marian Rejewski, to look into the Enigma.
A decoding job seems to me one of the most difficult, laborious, and both boring and thrilling things that you can do. You're looking at a sea of numbers or letters. They make absolutely no sense. What you're trying to do is find little patterns there.
German messages were often transmitted on the same radio net. Each command had different keys. Before encoding, the sender set his 3 rotors to a setting from the key list, chose a wheel setting at random, and encrypted the key. He then sent the 3 letters. To avoid confusion, he sent these key letters twice. Rejewski saw quickly that they were the key. This knowledge set up harmonics, mathematical relationships he could exploit, the first potential break into Enigma.
3 Poles, cryptanalysts, Różycki, Rejewski, and Zygarski, They were young and full of ideas. Because to break something like Enigma, you have also a vision. You have to have imagination.
The greatest was Marian Rejewski. He produced some very elegant mathematical theories which enabled him to work out which rotors were actually in the machine for a particular transmission. But they couldn't decipher the messages because the Germans, not being stupid, had used different wirings inside the rotors to those available on the commercial Enigma.
It looked hopeless despite their best efforts. The Poles couldn't crack the code. Then the Polish code breakers got a break from an unlikely source in the very shadow of the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin. In 1931, a man walked into the French embassy in Berlin. He claimed to be an officer in the Chiffrierstelle, the German coding office. He offered to sell secrets. The French were suspicious. The man claimed to have documents relating to the Enigma machine. The bait was vital. Enigma could give them a window into the innermost secrets of the German command. The German officer was Hans Thilo Schmidt. But what were his motives? It could be a provocation, a trick. He might be there to mislead them, or deceive them, or to entrap them. Why would a German officer betray the most closely held secrets of his nation? The answer was basic. The motive was money. The French assigned an agent, Colonel Bertrand, to look into the man's background. They found that Schmidt had an older brother, Rudolf, who commanded the code office.
World War I had a little bit corrupted the young Schmidt. He was lazy. He was not interested in making an honest living. He preferred chasing girls to anything else.
His brother, Rudolf, found a job for him in the Cipher Center.
Hans Thilo Schmidt was a sordid guy who realized that he had access to the most secret. He received about 10 million in today's francs, an enormous amount. It is certain we were dealing with a tough and intelligent man, and once he got the money, he wanted to quit. We had to make him understand that he had entered a world from which there was no escape.
Bertrand quickly photographed the documents. When he returned to Paris with the negatives, he realized what he had. He had the key to Enigma.
Bertrand went to his own people in the Cipher office, studied the documents and said, well, it's a machine. It's impossible to do anything.
Bertrand offered the secrets to the British, but had no more success.
And the French at that time, as had the British, had got nowhere with breaking Enigma. They were trying linguistic attacks which were bound to fail. And so the French, as a gesture of goodwill, gave this information to the Poles, not knowing what the Poles had been up to.
Schmidt handed over 2 sets of keys for 2 different quarters, the last month of the 3rd quarter and the 1st month of the 4th. This gave Rejewski what he needed. He compared settings in 2 quarters and found there were 3 rotors set in different order each quarter. With this information, for the first time, Enigma could be broken.
But then, of course, the problem was they had to have the keys in order to set up the machine to break the messages that they would receive.
In the next years, Schmidt met 34 times with the French. He handed over 25 keys. His handlers suspected his motives were changing. He had studied the Nazis and had joined the Nazi Party to work against it. The originals went back into the Chiffrierstelle safe. The monthly keys found their way to Poland. Now Rejewski could work out the wiring.
And this was one of the greatest feats of cryptography, and it raises Rejewski to the top of the pantheon of code breakers. So by the beginning of 1932, the Poles had actually got the wiring of the Enigma rotors. They then manufactured copies of the Enigma machine.
Rejewski then designed a machine he called the Bomba, which used 18 rotors to test the variations.
The Poles had got so good at all this that they were actually breaking 75% of the messages they were intercepting, and they kept very, very quiet about it.
What the Poles decrypted was terrifying.
In November 1937, Schmidt informed us that a secret meeting had just taken place at the Reichschancellery. At this meeting, Hitler revealed his ambitions. In 1938, I want the Anschluss. After the Anschluss, I want Czechoslovakia, then the Sudetenland. After the Sudetenland, I want Poland. After Poland, I want to eliminate the Western threat by going to Belgium and the Netherlands and to France. He's also drawn a map that shows the territory he wants, and this map, we've got it thanks to Schmidt. We knew it in 1937. What have we done with this information? Nothing.
The Germans were preparing for war. They turned their attention to the machine. They added new keys to the Enigma.
And then, in 1938, the Germans changed the system, which stopped Marian Rejewski's original mathematical calculations working. But then Zygalski produced some things called the Zygalski sheets, and these were perforated sheets with the grill method.
By passing light through multiple stacked sheets, constants in the code were instantly recognized. But then the Germans introduced 2 more rotors. It was too much for the Poles. Suddenly they realized they needed help.
Delegation from France and delegation from Great Britain was invited to the small village Perry, not far from Warsaw. And there, Polish cryptanalysts presented each delegation with one Enigma built in Poland.
As the British and the French spirited the Enigmas out of Poland, Hans Thilo Schmidt issued a final warning.
Et l'un des derniers messages qu'il a envoyé comme ça.
One of the last messages he sent was in the form of a map with invisible ink. In June of 1939, he wrote, "Watch out at the end of August."
39. Attention à la fin août. C'est vrai. C'est vrai.
At daybreak on September 1st, 1939, Blitzkrieg was no longer just a theory. Tank divisions exploded into Poland. The Luftwaffe pounded airfields and supply lines. Britain and France declared war on Germany. Polish cavalry attacked German tanks. Warsaw fell. Spring 1940, as Blitzkrieg threatened Europe, the enigmatic battle was joined in England, in a small railway junction town midway between Oxford and Cambridge. Bletchley Park, known as Station X, was secret headquarters for the government code and cipher school. The members of GC and CS also called themselves the Golf Club and Chess Society.
The British approach is to gather in Bletchley Park, outside of London, everybody they can think of who might be able to contribute to code breaking. They're going to get mathematicians, people who know how to break the crossword puzzle in the Times. They are going to get daffy kind of people who are eccentric and wander around, but they've got good brains. So in a sense, you've got the two cultures, one of the machine that's distrustful of human beings, and you've got the British society saying, well, we'll get these funny guys from Oxford together, and they'll come up with something.
They put aerials all around and started listening to German radio transmissions. But they soon realized it wasn't a particularly bright idea to have aerials all over a site they wanted to keep secret. So they moved the listening out to the so-called Y stations, the intercept stations, all over the country.
The young mathematician, Gordon Welchman, studied the intercepts. Different keys suggested different radio webs, different command structures. He charted the intercepts, started to find context to build a picture of the nets and keys. Meanwhile, Harry Hinsley, a young Cambridge student, analyzed the traffic.
Once the German radio network had to extend itself along the Norwegian coast, you see, after the occupation of Norway, it became much more volatile. You know, its behavior began to vary much more than previously. I began to be able to forecast naval movements because the behavior of this great signal system was so strange that I had no doubt that it meant the movement of big ships out of the Baltic, and nothing so startling had happened before. I spoke to a man in the Operational Intelligence Center and said, do something. There is something going to move out of the Baltic. Big stuff.
Hinsley was a 21-year-old undergraduate. Bletchley wasn't supposed to do intelligence work, only cryptanalysis.
And he listened very patiently, wrote my comments in their war diary, but he wouldn't take it further. Anyway, they took no action. 2 battle cruisers, Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, went up the coast, sank the Glorious without any warning. She didn't have time to make a signal. And the first we heard about it was from a German radio broadcast. Well, you can imagine the results of that on the relations between us and the Admiralty.
Bletchley was learning to combine signals intelligence with traffic analysis and with what they called cribs.
It's not the cipher system, it's the humans around the outside that cause the problem. And this was very much the case with the Germans. They were very slipshod and they used very slap-happy ways of sending messages, in particular of selecting message keys. One of the favorite people of Bletchley Park here was some poor German. Every week he set his Enigma rotors to the letter start position WAL and then turned them to the message key KLA. And after a while they worked out this was Walter and his girlfriend's name was Clara. That's how he remembered it.
Every major command would send a birthday greeting to Hitler. Suddenly, several hundred air, ground, and naval commands would be sending encrypted messages to Berlin congratulating Hitler on his birthday. This gave them fantastic numbers of cribs.
Now, a crib is known plain text in modern terms, where from other inferences you can guess pretty well what the text was, which was used to encipher this particular message. Crib hunting was a major exercise here, and it started as soon as you began to get traffic in. It was a continuous race against time. Every second counted, 100% accuracy, couldn't make any mistakes.
I remember, for example, working for 36 hours at a stretch on 1 or 2 occasions, and being unaware of any fatigue. I found it enormous fun.
The Germans changed the key every night at midnight. And if you could break 1 or 2 messages on that key, then you were in to the whole of the transmission for the rest of those 24 hours.
A crib was a glimpse into the Enigma, a crack in the armor. Now they must throw all their forces into the breach.
And what they come up with is, we've got to get a machine that will crack that machine.
The machine the British set out to build was first imagined by an eccentric mathematical genius. In 1936, Alan Turing wrote a paper on the computability of numbers and created something new.
Turing was the first to bring scientific method into it at all. And that he followed through with the whole theory of probability and statistics, which was applied to all the aspects of the high-level work.
He was brilliant, there's no question about that. And of course he had these eccentric behavior like a lot of people, but it was a bit extreme in him.
There are certain things that Turing did which did annoy people, like he didn't say hello to people when he saw them first thing in the morning on the basis they'd actually said hello to them the day before, and he didn't think the reason why it made any difference because the sun had broken again.
Turing wandered around Bletchley wearing his gas mask. It aided his hay fever, but added to his eccentric legend.
He would see to the heart of a problem. That's a great gift, to be able to get right to the heart of a problem.
It was the Entscheidungsproblem, the question of whether there is some mathematical method to learn the truth, to break a code. Cribs and breaks had reduced the practical possibilities generated by Enigma to 10 to the 23rd power. Only 100,000 billion.
The problem is, in this enormous range of 10 to the 20 possibilities, to find the one which gives you the solution. And you've got to find that quickly.
He needs some very clever logical ideas to eliminate huge numbers of those possibilities.
He came up with a very, I think, very brilliant idea, and that was that from a contradiction, you can deduce everything.
Turing's idea is not to find the right answer, but the wrong ones. A wrong answer would give an infinite number of solutions. If you got infinite solutions, the answer must be wrong. One could identify these and eliminate them.
If you imagine this as being a search tree, where you have a peak and you go down to 10 to 20 leaves at the bottom of this, the prior best knowledge was to work your way down this tree looking for the one solution which gave the answer. Turing said, no, that isn't the way to do it. What you do is you prune off all the branches that it can't possibly be, right? And then you're left with a possible number of solutions which you then got to investigate.
With human brain power, the idea of first eliminating wrong answers was useless. It would take years. But Turing attempted to model the mind as machine, in which thoughts could be broken down into small tasks and attacked step by step in machine logic. This obscure revolutionary thought would not only have the greatest effect on the war, but in ways not yet imagined on future civilization. Turing then took the idea of the Polish bomba and developed it into the Turing bomb with dozens of rotors. This machine rapidly churned through all key possibilities. Wrong ones would churn on and on. Possible keys that couldn't be proven wrong, the bomb would stop. Cryptanalysts set this potential key into the Enigma machine and typed in the intercepted code. If plain text decrypt came out, they had broken the key. They were in.
And they reckoned in Hut 6 and Hut 8, they hadn't done very well if they hadn't broken it by 3 o'clock in the morning. And the bogey time for breaking an Enigma key was 14 minutes.
When you combine Nazi stupidity with the German love of good order, you again get something which is very vulnerable, because it meant not only did they send out these great statements of their marvelous victories each day, but they sent them out at the same time each day, so we could identify them. Not only did they send them out at the same time each day, but they sent them out on every channel. So if we were reading one cipher, we would get the clear, and we would use that clear to obtain key for another cipher.
In the spring of 1940, the Allies were starting to break the codes, but without the ability to act on what they'd learned, there was little they could do. Although they declared it, the British were not prepared for war. On land, the Blitzkrieg paused. Soldiers settled down to the Sitzkrieg, the phony war. At sea, the war was not so phony. Death and destruction stalked the North Atlantic. In the longest battle of the war in the Atlantic, Admiral Karl Dönnitz's U-boats threatened the lifeline of the Allies.
Churchill was always aware that this was the critical issue. If Britain had lost the Battle of the Atlantic, we would simply have had to resign. We just would have to give up.
In this critical battle, the naval Enigma with a special keying system could not be read.
And the idea that Turing constantly pressed on me, you cannot get into this naval Enigma unless we can get some external material. That was enough. That was enough.
Hinsley himself came up with the answer.
Germans kept 2 little trawlers on station in the Arctic. One off Greenland, one off northern Iceland, for weather reporting. I discovered their patrol positions, which were always the same, that they were on station for 7, 8 weeks, and that they carried the Enigma. Believe it or not, even in those little trawlers doing nothing but report weather, they had the Enigma. And I guessed, I knew that if they were out for 8 weeks, they had to have more than 1 month's setting sheet. The current setting sheet would be on the operator's desk, and he had a bucket of water next to his desk. If he was boarded, he put the setting sheet in the bucket, and the ink ran. But the next month's would be in the safe.
Hinsley called the Admiralty. Destroyers steamed out of Scapa Flow.
Just when the sun was coming up. Boarding party on board before the boys are awake. Our man down to the signaling office and the captain's cabin. Engineer breaks the safe. Out they come. Tow the trawler back to Scapa Flow. Put the German crew in Canary in very secure premises where they won't be able to report that they've been boarded, you see. Beautiful job. Nice, sweet operation. Every morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, regular as clockwork, he would come up. This is Weather Station Brest, reporting at 0800. You put that on Turing machines, and out comes the setting for the day.
They were in to the naval Enigma.
Using it now offensively, we simply hammered the U-boats. Their life was a misery.
Alors nous avons été avisés.
We were informed by Schmidt about the German command's intention to penetrate Belgium and advance to France right through the Ardennes.
Et ensuite de filer vers la France en utilisant précisément les Ardennes.
French intelligence reported Schmidt's warning to the High Command. The response was disbelief.
C'est pas possible.
They said, it is not possible that an armored force, the Wehrmacht,
Guys, first they must defeat the Royal Air Force. Churchill spoke to the nation. Never, in the course of human endeavor, has so much been owed by so many to so few. Not so few as was thought. The Battle of Britain was the RAF's finest hour. But Churchill knew and could not disclose that the secret army at Bletchley was growing. Nearly 10,000 people were now hard at work breaking Enigma. With the fall of France, army messages went to more secure ground lines. But Luftwaffe intercepts revealed German thinking. On the Channel coast, the Germans were lengthening runways for an air assault on Britain. In August, Goering's message to his troops decrypted as Adlertag, Eagle Day. Something was up. But what? Then, on August 13th, a Luftwaffe bomber stream appeared roaring down the Thames. Eagle Day, an all-out assault on London, was designed to break the will of the British. RAF fighters swarmed the first wave of bombers, then rearmed to meet the second. The bombers broke off the attack and fled. To the surprised Germans, it appeared that the number of British fighters was inexhaustible. The Germans lost heart. In September, Enigma broke a momentous message. Hitler had ordered the removal of invasion support craft. Britain had held off the vaunted Luftwaffe. Decrypted Enigma intercepts, now codenamed Ultra, started to play a part in an offensive strategy.
And as you can imagine, Ultra, which was the product of the Enigma, had to be distributed and used with immense care. At every command post, there was a blitzly trained signaler and decipherer. It was they who did the signaling, took the decrypt across to the intelligence staff, stood over it till it was finished with, collected it back, burned it.
It was very important that the field commanders understood, and they were expressly commanded by Churchill, that they were to take no action which could give away to the Axis forces that the information had come from Ultra.
If you knew from Ultra that there was a ship in an area you wanted to sink, you would try to have an airplane show up near that ship that they would see drop out of the clouds, so that lookout would say, oh, we've been spotted by an Allied aircraft. So when it got torpedoed or attacked later, they didn't know it was because we had broken an encrypted message.
In North Africa, signal security was critical. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel was reading a broken American code which revealed British plans. Informed by Ultra and by captured documents of the breach, the Americans changed their code. Rommel's legendary intuitive strategy waned.
We got the Army Ultra, enough of it, just in time to enable General Auchinleck to keep Rommel out of Cairo. Every time Rommel planned, I'll get through there, you see, Auchinleck could get his forces just in time. If it hadn't been for that ground intelligence, plus the resources that we were destroying, the Germans would have occupied Cairo.
Montgomery used Ultra in a grand deception at El Alamein, which led Rommel to attack into a British trap.
Part of the British objective was to supply them with false information about the nature of strategy, that magic word. The misleading the mind of Hitler became a major industry in Britain. A very elegant industry, too.
Churchill depended on Ultra. He demanded daily decodes. While beneath the London pavement at Storey's Gate, near the secret underground cabinet war rooms, a new covert organization was formed. The London Controlling Section was created to coordinate planning. Interception of Enigma, propagation of Ultra, and deception would be integrated into one grand strategy, summed up in words attributed to both Churchill and to Joseph Stalin. In war, the truth is so precious that it must always be surrounded by a bodyguard of lies. 1942. In North Africa, the Allies battled back, but suddenly, without warning, the sea war turned against them.
First of February 42, we lost the U-boats.
Admiral Dönitz had introduced the four-rotor naval Enigma and a new system of keys.
He starts the second phase now with even more U-boats with bigger range, the losses start going up to absolutely stupendous levels, higher than ever before.
Bletchley named Dernitz's new key Shark, and his losses mounted, attacked it desperately. For 8 long months, they failed. Then, in September 1942, the British destroyer Petard found a German sub in the Mediterranean. Depth charges brought it to the surface. As the crew abandoned ship and the U-559 foundered, 3 British sailors dove into the sinking sub and grabbed the codes. Only 1 sailor got out. Anthony Fasson and Colin Grazier went down with the boat, but the British had the keys. In November, Bletchley broke back into Enigma, into Shark. But in 1943, yet another cipher machine appeared, which encoded and transmitted simultaneously by teletype. It was much faster and used at the highest level of Nazi command. The machine was called Geheimschreiber, secret writer. The British called the code Fish. The British used their experience with Enigma. They attempted to break Fish.
Again, it was serious procedural errors on the part of the German operators, inadvertently enciphering 2 messages using the same key.
Turing's bomb was electromechanical. To break the new codes, they would have to build hundreds of bombs. They needed something faster. They needed the speed of electrons. They needed an electronic device. To break the secret writer, the Bletchley Group created the world's first electronic computer, Colossus. It came online just in time for D-Day.
With that cipher available as well as the Enigma, we gradually were able to build up knowledge about the German forces opposing landing. We had the whole strategic and tactical picture of the German plans and dispositions for throwing off the invasion.
Eisenhower embraced Ultra and made deception a key to his D-Day strategy. A phantom army under General George Patton was created to convince the Germans that the invasion would come at the Pas-de-Calais.
The fact that we knew what the Germans were thinking and what they were saying and how many of these messages were being accepted enabled us to very much better plan this operation and carry out the deception.
Persuaded that the Normandy landing was only a feint, Hitler held back his forces until it was too late. Ultra aided in the breakout at the Falaise pocket in Normandy. Some Germans were suspicious. The Allies were too prepared, too intuitive, too lucky. The Germans were reluctant to face reality. The coding officers found it difficult to admit to themselves, to their chiefs, and to the Führer that everything they'd done was worthless. Instead, they believed the more obvious, that the Allies had penetrated the high command. To the Nazis, humans could be weak, but their war machine was infallible.
Because of this arrogance, because they despised us so much, they held us in such contempt, they couldn't think that we, the Untermensch, the sub-race, could possibly be deciphering messages enciphered by the Übermensch, the super-race. I mean, it was just contrary to their whole philosophy, and thank goodness for that.
To the end of the 1,000-year Reich, which lasted 12 years, the Germans entrusted their most secret plans to Enigma. They never caught on. enigma of Enigma is why the Allies were able to break it. The machine cipher was considered unsolvable. The Germans devoted great organizational skill to safeguarding their secrets, yet the safeguard itself and the supreme faith placed in it by its creators became one of the most powerful weapons in the Allied arsenal. Many factors combined to break Enigma. Desperate Poles created new mathematical theories. A German officer turned traitor. Tired soldiers gave out keys. Brilliant minds came together at Bletchley Park. But perhaps the most important element was the character of the Nazis themselves. Nazi tyranny did not encourage free thought. The Allies were able to identify and to put their best minds into cryptology. In Germany, the best minds did not go into cryptology. Many of the best minds went into concentration camps.
To get rid of so many of your leading intellectuals, if you want to conduct a high-tech war, is absolutely stupid.
The Nazis stifled thought and demanded allegiance to a race of supermen, themselves. The Nazis were at war with the intellect. The best minds worked against them. The best minds broke the unbreakable Enigma and, at the very least, shortened the war.
People sometimes say that Ultra won the war. This is an exaggeration. The war was won by the men in the trenches, by the men flying the airplanes, by the men manning the ships. These were the people who won the war. What Ultra did was save an awful lot of lives. It did so by shortening the war.
If Hitler had won the war, he would have dominated the entire Earth. That was his idea. And then his system would have lasted, as he had hoped, for 1,000 years. That's what he was after. I think people just want to be modest in their claims. So they make a claim that is very reasonable, that it shortened the war by 2 years. But it might have saved the world, might have saved civilization.
After the war, Winston Churchill wrote a multi-volume history of the conflict. He'd learned his lesson well. He never mentioned Ultra. Marian Rejewski fled to England during the war. After the war, from the Polish government, he received a few minor medals. From the Allies, he received no medals, no rewards. Hans Thilo Schmidt was betrayed by a French agent. In 1943, he died in Gestapo hands. In 1954, after a conviction related to his homosexuality, Alan Turing committed suicide. His ideas and the ideas developed by the Poles and the cryptographers at Bletchley Park in the heat of a desperate war, from the bomba to the bombs to Colossus, were the archetypes for perhaps the most important invention of the 20th century, the computer.